Hello everyone, welcome to today's Luohan webinar. It's Xijie from Luohan Academy. So today we are very happy to have Professor Bao from Nanyang Technological University to talk about mortality salience and time preference and prosocial behavior. So Professor Bao is an associate professor of economics at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and he received his PhD in economics in the year 2012 from University of Amsterdam. Since then, he has been doing research on the topics including experimental economics, behavioral finance, and real estate economics. His work has been published in leading journals, including Economic Journal, a European Economic Review, among others. So without further ado, please join me to welcome Professor Bao. Professor Bao, the floor is yours. Please take it over. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gao, and thank you very much for colleagues in Luohan Institute for having me here in this webinar. I hope my connection is good enough and my voice is neither too high or too low. If you experience any problems, please feel to let me know via chat and so on and so forth. So yeah, my name is Bao Tu. I'm currently working in Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, in the School of Social Sciences. And I'm mainly experimental economist and also behavior economist. So today I'm going to present a joint work with Prof. Li Xun from Wuhan University and Xia Congling from Guanghua School of Management, Peking University. The title of my talk is Larger Than Life, an experiment on mortality salience, time preference, and prosocial behavior. Okay, so here mortality salience sounds a little bit like a jargon, but it basically means something like awareness of death or awareness of the limitedness of life. Yeah, like when you realize that the life is limited for people. And of course, I mean, just to start with, right, in popular culture, everywhere we have sayings that start with life is limited or life is short. Okay, I just collected 4 pieces, but I believe there are much more than that. So the first one is, I think, by a Swiss writer, right? So in general, it's a long sentence, but it just means that, okay, life is too short. So don't waste it doing things bad on others, but try to be happy yourself and try to help others. Okay. And second one, I think everybody will know this guy, a very lovely guy from the Three Kingdoms era. And if you follow me on Weibo, you will see I talk about him a lot. Mr. Cao Cao, 对酒当歌，人生几何 Yeah, life is short and you should enjoy wines and alcohol. Right? So that's his recommendation. We may also have this gentleman, this British gentleman, even though I think he has a French or Italian family name, Mr. Benjamin Disraeli. I think he used to be one British prime minister. Okay, so he says life is too short to be insignificant. So that's actually the first version of the title of my paper. Life is too short to be small. So life is only once, and you should try to use it to do something big for yourself. Okay. And the last one, I believe, I mean, for people, for friends from Luohan Institute and for friends from Damu Institute, you are going to like it, right? Life is limited, and you need Python. You need programming to make it meaningful. Okay, so that's many things people can say about what we should do when we know that life is limited. Okay, and so the key research question of this paper, again followed by 2 pictures, will be just like this. So knowing that, right? So in general, people have the tendency to think realizing that life is limited will make us better person, make us trying to do something good. But is that really true? I mean, it's a good intuition, but is that really true? Okay, from popular culture, right? We all have, I think, known the names of 钢铁是怎样炼成的. It's a very famous Soviet times fiction, right? We know that you have only one life, right? You want to do that really meaningfully. And if you don't like that version, you can also choose this version, this American version, right? I don't know whether nowadays people still know the name. I think the name of the band is West Town Boys, 西城男孩. Right? So they have a very famous song, really called Larger Than Life. So life is short, you want to make it meaningful, you want to make it larger. Okay, you really want to be big and good. Okay, so that's basically a general sense, but how is that going to be related to economics? Why does it matter for economics? So from economics point of view, I think the first thing that jumps into our mind will probably be time preference, or probably time preference. So here, yeah, maybe you can allow me to go back to Professor Irving Fisher, right? Really like the founding father of modern monetary theory in macroeconomics. According to Professor Irving Fisher, he says that one reason why future rewards are discounted is that an intervening death may prevent us from realizing such rewards. Or to say it in simple, if, let's say, in case somebody died tomorrow, he will not be able to enjoy benefits that comes the day after tomorrow or 1 week later. So that may be a very natural biological and psychological foundation for discount rate. Right? Why we discount future benefits? Because there's a risk that we don't have the life to enjoy it. That's one possibility. And if you prime people with mortality salience, it might be possible that that will lead to higher time discount rate, Namely, if people like become more aware of the fact that life is limited, maybe they'll think that, well, since life is limited, so probably tomorrow may not come, so let's enjoy today. And if this is indeed the case, that can be associated with many economic behavior and decisions. So for example, so first of all, right? So if people have higher discount rate for tomorrow, let's say they discount tomorrow more, or if they become more impatient. So in general, that will give them the inclination to save less. And if they save less, in general, they tend to accumulate less wealth over their life cycle. That's also possible. And then if that is the case, actually somebody also say, right, from psychology literature, if people are less patient, they may also give birth to fewer children. So this may be also related to our recent demographic trend in China and in many other countries. Okay, time preference is very important for many things. Okay, and parallelly, hi.
Yes, yeah, I want to add on this point on the kind of birth rate in China. I think that's partly related to not the kind of mortality salience, but the overall evolution thing in China. So people kind of usually work too hard and they kind of have this kind of limited amount of time feeling in their life.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very likely. So maybe if, let's say, if your tempo, right, so tempo of life is fast, you also feel like your life is shorter. It could be that. It could be like that intuitively. Thanks. That's very true. And also, like parallel to the economics literature, in the psychology literature, there is actually a large body of studies that focusing on how mortality salience is going to influence prosocial preference and prosocial behavior. More specifically, we really do see that they have something called, it also sounds a very scary name, called terror management theory, but it has nothing to do with terrorists. It just says that you feel terrified about death, and in order to reduce the feeling of terror from death, you want to do something meaningful, something symbolic, such that you have the feeling that, okay, so your kind of body will have a limited life, but your spirit will live for longer or even forever. So that's in general like the intuition behind this. And what they do is also like if they prime people, if they ask people to consciously think about their destiny of mortality, then they find that in general, in psychological studies, they find that that makes people to donate more or offer more in Dictator games or Ultimatum games. I'm going to elaborate on that later to suppress the anxiety due to the thoughts of death. So this is what the psychologist will say about the relationship between mortality salience and prosocial behavior. Okay, but at the same time, if you really want to argue against the psychologist, you can also find your argument. Okay, so for example, I think people from my generation probably will know this very famous TV series called Breaking Bad. So you have this 中文名字叫绝命毒师. It's like a normal high school chemistry teacher, but one day suddenly he knows that he got, I think, lung cancer, and then he feel like I'm not going to live for long, but I still have a family and I don't have enough savings for them. And that turned him actually into a big drug maker and drug dealer, a very cruel guy, like a double life story. Okay, and I mean, even without talking about this kind of a popular culture, we can also think about many things, just think about people's reaction to catastrophes. So let's say in the US, if after the Katrina, or ask all these kind of a flood or hurricanes and so on and so forth. Well, you see people do good things after that, but you also see people do crazy things and bad things after that. Let's say shoplifting, shop robbery, many of that. And I mean, if you really want, we can also talk about what people do during the COVID, right? When there is a more salience and risk of that. But of course, for these kind of things, I also want to highlight, if you want to do empirical study using this kind of data, there's a risk of confounding factors, because during catastrophes, people have both increased mortality salience and real mortality risk. So the two things are increasing at the same time. So that makes it hard to disentangle the effect of the two. But if we do the laboratory study, we can easily separate the two. Okay, all right. So then here is something like the conceptual framework of what we try to do in this paper. Okay. So we have three main concepts called mortality salience, the awareness of death, unavoidability of death, right? And time preference, the discounting behavior, discount rate, and prosocial behavior. So from economics literature, Professor Irvin Fisher told us mortality salience must influence time preference, but there is actually no evidence, at least to our knowledge, not very systematically documented evidence on this. There's a theory, but seems to be a lack of evidence. From psychological literature, there is both theory, the terror management theory, and evidence showing that mortality salience make people behaving more prosocial. But and they also have evidence. But if you really think about it, first of all, this is not an economics literature. We do things very differently in economics and psychology. Secondly, if we know mortality salience is influencing both time preference and prosocial behavior, wouldn't you be curious about whether there's a linkage between the two? So suppose that we find evidence of the arrow on the left. Wouldn't you be curious whether there's some kind of interplay between them? So for example, whether mortality salience influence time preference via prosocial behavior, or mortality salience influence prosocial behavior via time preference. So that's the target of this paper. So we want to examine the relationship between all the three guys together in the same paper and try to get a whole picture of what happens between the interplay between them. Okay. All right.
One question,
Hi,
Professor Bao.
yeah.
This is Yingzhi from Luohan. Can you go back to excuse me. Yeah. So I was wondering that whether this distinction between time preference and prosocial behavior are clean enough, because you propose a theory saying mortality salience will affect people's time preference. But
yes,
if we think from a repeated games point of view, that
yes,
it's more like I'm not sure when the game will end. Then even my time preference, given my time preference doesn't change, that will affect my equilibrium strategy. right? So
I see.
yeah, I was wondering whether time preference is a kind of necessary condition to explain those change in behavior or strategy when the mortality salience are changing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a very professional game theorist comment to our study. And actually, I haven't got this comment before. I think that's really a good one. I think my quick reply to it is mainly twofold. So first of all, I think from game theory point of view, you are definitely right. So if the discount rate becomes higher, that should make people behave more selfishly, more in a more selfish way. But if I jump to the conclusion and finding of this paper, actually our finding is a little bit surprising. We find that when people's discount rate becomes smaller, or when people are more patient, they behave as if they are more selfish. So basically, a little. I mean, from theory point of view, you're definitely right. But actually, our finding is a little bit to the opposite. And so that's why we set up a little bit a different model or different mechanism to explain this. But definitely, I think we should discuss your perspective in our paper, because first of all, from theory point of view, that's really important, and that's really right. And secondly, indeed, in the end, the story we find is also like mortality salience seem to influence prosocial behavior partly through time preference, even though our explanation is a little bit different. And we also acknowledge that maybe people have disagreement on that. We have to make strong assumptions on that to justify it. But okay, so for the moment, I need to leave the details for the later parts. But for sure, thank you very much for your comment. I think that's really a good one. And yeah, we don't have it now, but we should add it.
Look forward for the result. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So here is the thing. Okay, so our approach to study this problem is we first introduce mortality salience in the experiment. I'm going to elaborate on that too. And then we elicit the time preference using a very standard, what we call multiple price list method. Okay, so this is again a jargon. So there's no price in it, but it just means that people do the multiple, the choice between A and B. So it's a multiple. So this is, okay. I think this is similar to A/B test in Luohan instead of a price setting. And then, in order to elicit their prosocial attitude, we have two behavioral games, namely the Andreoni-Miller Dictator Game and I think the Chinese jealousy game. So I'm also going to elaborate on the details of the two games. Here are our main findings. So first of all, we do find that it seems mortality salience makes subjects think bigger. It's really like a bigger picture. Bigger in the sense that they behave more like the maximizer of a social welfare function. Really makes them like as if they are behaving like social planners in our textbook. Okay, even though it actually doesn't necessarily make them care more about their opponent's well-being. Namely, they don't make them more kind and generous towards the other person. So they are not going to sacrifice their own benefit to improve the other's benefit if that's not efficient. They only do that when it's efficient. So they do more sacrifice only when it's more efficient to do so. So this is our finding. It doesn't make people more altruistic per se. It makes people more behave like a social planner, really bigger self. Yeah. Okay. Second, we do find a linkage between time preference and social behavior. We do have a model for it. Okay. And third, we rule out other explanations. So for example, some people may argue, okay, so you have mortality salience, but people are afraid of that. When you prime them with that, they feel sad, they feel afraid, and that change behavior. But no, actually we checked the subject's mood level before and after our priming, and we don't see a significant difference. So mood is not the channel that generates our result in our paper. So that's a robustness check. Okay. And in terms of contribution, so here's what we try to claim. So first of all, so our findings seems to help to explain many things, especially there seems to be contradictory observations on whether mortality salience lead to more prosocial or less prosocial behavior. So there's a big survey on that, including lab evidence and also like people's behavior after catastrophes. Okay, and secondly, we build a linkage between mortality salience, time preference, and prosocial behavior. And thirdly, we also provide a simple and innovative way of priming people with mortality salience in economics experiment. Okay, so that's our introduction, and here are like our experimental design. So in general, here is a general information. It's done in Luohan University in the laboratory for experiment. We did that in 2018. Subjects were recruited via WeChat platform. We recruited 202 subjects in total. Because it's a paired experiment. So in terms of observation, it's going to be 101 observations because it's paired. 2 persons, 1 observation. Okay, and well, it's just a 50 observation for control and 51 for treatment. I know it looks very small for your guys in the tech company, but trust me, in laboratory experiment, this is okay. This is okay, quite okay number. Okay, the average duration of the session is 40 minutes, and the payoff is about 70 yuan, RMB yuan. Fully computerized, and yeah, the subjects are not allowed to talk to others during the experiment. They're also not allowed to go back to previous part when they finish, when they move on to a later parts. Okay, so it's really a 3 parts experiment. In part 1, we do the priming. Priming, namely, we have a treatment group and control group. In general, they see something very similar. Their task in the priming part is quite comparable. It's just counting squares. But the meaning of counting squares is a little bit different. We prime the subjects with a meaning of like a life expectation or life expectancy in the treatment group, but not in the control group. More specifically, this is what we do. So basically, we know that in China, the average life expectancy is about 74 years for male and 75 for female. And if you want to translate that into month and multiply by 12, that's going to be about 900 months. So everybody life expectancy is about 900 months. Okay. So we just repeatedly, I think after ask the subjects like 5 or 6 questions, like, okay, so according to the data of National Statistics Bureau, here is the life expectancy in China. Okay, each of the following drawing is a 30 times 30 square paper. So each square is like a month in your life. Okay, and yeah. So suppose you were born in year 2000 at the time. So basically, I think if you are born in around year 2000, you will be about 20 years old. You're 20 years old, so namely you will probably have color squares about 240 or something like that. Okay, and then it's just also like, okay, we'll show you the life you have, the lifetime you have spent in the color, the squared. You count the squared, and you tell me what is the fraction of your total lifespan has been spent, and the expected remaining length of your life is about how many months. So this is a simple way of eliciting their awareness of a life is limited. And in the control group, we also ask them to do the counting the squares task. But it's just like we ask them, okay, please tell us or estimate the fraction of a colored square or lattices of all squares in the graph, and also tell us how many squares are uncolored. So so they do the same task. The only thing is the first one seems to have a meaning and the second one doesn't have a meaning.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm wondering what's the demographic of the subjects. Are they all students?
They are all students. Yeah, they are all students.
Like in around 20.
Around 20, yeah, they are Luohan University students, and because that was done in the year 2018, so actually we were in the years before the pandemic, but they were not exposed to the influence of the pandemic. Okay.
Okay, then maybe one concern is that if this kind of priming thing is going to have a different impact on different people with different demographics, let's say.
Yeah. But that's also like the thing. Like, so at least for laboratory experiments, suppose we have, let's say, 50 independent observations. Usually, using this between subject design, we think that we can effectively average out the effect of individual characteristics. So it's not going to be a big concern, especially if our sample is a quite usually more homogeneous sample. Okay, and the question 7, besides the 6 questions, asking them hypothetical questions, we also have question 7 and question 8. It's also something similar like this. Okay, so how many years old are you? How old are you now? In the average life expectancy, the proportion of your life that has been spent was what is the fraction and what is remaining length of your life, and also if suppose you waste 1 hour per day, so in terms of your total life, how many months or how many squares are you going to waste in your whole life? Simple calculation question. And in the control group, basically we just ask them the question about, let's say, we'll tell them the area of Hubei and the area of Xinjiang, and ask them what is the fraction of the area of Hubei or Xinjiang as against the total area of China. So the complexity of calculation will be similar, but the meaning is just like one is related to life and the other is not related to life.
You know, when confronting with mortality salience, perhaps it changes people's preference in the dynamic horizon, but it also changes people's attitude towards risk. So particularly when people, for example, hate to lose what they have already had, then they might change from risk aversion to risk loving way. Yeah, something like prospect theory. So that is also going to exert a first order impact on your model implication.
Thank you very much, Professor Han. That's a very good comment. Yeah, it's actually a pity. So we elicited time preference, but somehow we didn't elicit risk preference. Actually, at the very end of the study, we're going to discuss a little bit about the overall relationship between our study on the, let's say, on the overall literature on time preference, risk preference, and prosocial preference. And actually, we are aware that, let's say, there is a big literature on the relationship between time preference and risk preference. So for example, we have a series of AER paper and AER comment paper in the year 2012, led by Professor Andreoni and Spranger in year 2012. Like time preference is not risk preference, with this title and a series of comments. That's a very big literature. And also recently, I noticed that there is a literature written by my friends and acquaintance in Erasmus University, Rotterdam, by the Peter Walker team. Peter Walker team, I think one of my friend, Li Chen, together with also Ahriel Bayon, those researchers, they also have a few publications, few papers on saying, okay, actually, risk preference can influence prosocial behavior. So, for example, ambiguity attitude can actually explain people's behavior in trust game. Let's say people may perceive trusting problem or being trusted problem as a problem of ambiguity, because it's just also like whether I want to trust a guy, right? Whether I want to trust a guy. It's also similar to I have ambiguity about the riskiness of me trusting him or her. So that's a big literature. Okay, so it's a pity that we didn't have risk task in our experiment. That's really a pity. But at the same time, we also want to argue that because there hasn't been a study on the direct relationship between time preference and prosocial behavior. So to this extent, this is our contribution. So we think we are one of the first to read, and in the end, I think we're all pointing into the same direction, how time, risk, and the prosocial behavior are interlinked to each other. Yeah.
Thank you.
But thank you very much for your question. That's really a very big one. We should have discussed that, but we didn't. Okay. All right. So in terms of eliciting time preference, so here's what we do using the multiple price list method, in case some of the audience is not familiar to that. So you can see this is actually quite simple. Like you choose two amounts of money to receive. You can choose to have 400 yuan tomorrow, or some amount of money that's larger than 400 in 31 days. Okay, so I think first of all, I want to explain why is it tomorrow and 31 days later, not today and 30 days later, because we all know people have hyperbolic discounting. So from today to tomorrow, there's a big discount. So in order to avoid the short-term the impact of short-term hyperbolic discounting, nowadays we usually do tomorrow and 31 days instead of today and 30 days. But this is again a good measure of people's 30 days discount rate or 30 days required interest rate. Okay, so whether you want to have 400 today or maybe 400 for 31 days later. So this is basically like, okay, so if you are a very, very impatient person, you are very likely to choose row A more often. If you are a very patient person, you are more likely to choose option B. Okay, so basically, and also the way we elicit the discount rate is just to look at the time when people move from row A to row B. People move from row A to row B, because at the beginning, people for sure, they want to choose probably 400, 400 yuan tomorrow. But gradually, right, little by little, when you see that option B gets more and more money, you're going to switch to option B sooner or later. So basically, sooner means you are more patient, and later means you are more impatient.
Yeah, can I ask one question? Maybe can follow-up question to Hanqing's.
Yeah.
Whether this kind of discount rate measured by this way, does it depend on the base value you set here, $400?
To my knowledge, no. So this is a very sound method. I think firstly proposed by Hall and Laurie, and later on repeatedly tested using different values from, let's say, $10 to even like $1,000. And I mean, of course, many people may think that the result may depend on the stake, but actually, at least from the laboratory evidence, to my knowledge, the discount rate is very stable across the stake. So if you change it, usually doesn't change. I mean, people do have a tag on this. So the usual attack, I can be very honest on this. I can be very honest. The usual attack on this method is that if you look at this, the required interest rate elicited by this method is usually very big. If you annualize it, if you use the annualized interest rate, usually that gives you a ridiculously big number. Yeah, that's the shortcoming of this method. But stake doesn't matter. And also because we're comparing people, so we're not using this for designing interest rate. We're just comparing whether you are more impatient or less impatient. So at least for comparing people, this is still sufficient for the goal scientifically.
Okay.
Right. So the discount rate is calculated very simple. We just use the required interest rate. So for example, if a subject thinks 400 today, tomorrow is as good as 416 in 31 days. So then the more or less the required 30-day discount rate is 16 divided by 400, 4%, something like that. So this is the method we use. And then we have two behavioral games about prosocial behavior, namely Dictator Game and the Jealousy Game. So, and also in case some audience are not familiar with this, I'm going to go through the details one by one. So in general, this Dictator Game in our experiment is a little bit more complicated than the usual Dictator Game, because the money player 1 or player A give to player 2 is multiplied by a factor R.
Hi, Professor Bao, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I think there's some network problem.
Okay. How about now? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay now.
Okay. Yeah, and also I would also say that Ultimatum Game is one of the beginning of the whole behavior economics literature. That's a very important economics literature, a very important paper. Okay, so this paper was published in year 1982 in Jibo. So by a group of German authors, including very famous behavior economist Vinagut. So Vinagut is the gentleman in the picture on the left. Okay, and for some Luohan Academy friends, maybe you know, my personal friend, Ding Jieyao, Dr. Ding Jieyao, working in Ali. Ding Jieyao is the student of Professor Vinagut. So, yeah, Vinagut is the designer of Ultimatum Game. And the general idea is just like, so suppose there are $10, right? Player A can propose how to divide it between player A and player B. Player B only says yes or no. It's really like ultimatum, 最后通牒. Player A says, I'm going to divide it this way, you say yes or no. If player B says yes, the money is divided accordingly. And player B says no, both will get 0. So the money is gone. Okay, something like this. And according to seminal standard game theory, of course, the rational, if both A and B are homo economicus, A should offer 1 penny to B, and B should accept. Because 1 penny is better than 0, so B should accept. Knowing that B will accept any amount larger than 1 penny, A should offer B no more than 1 penny to try to exploit B as much as possible. But of course, this is not what we observe about real human beings from real life. Okay, we see that many people will go for half-half in the lab. And on average, A is going to send 30% of the stake to B. Okay, so it's a strong evidence against the assumption that people will be homo economicus, 理性经纪人. And but again, there will be some criticism on it, because in this experiment, people will say that this result, it's hard to say whether this result says A cares the benefit of B, or A gives B some money because of the fear of being rejected. So that is why we have the modification of what we call Dictator Game. So Dictator Game was then developed by Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman and his co-authors Jack Nash and Richard Thaler in year 1986 in AER. And in this paper, the game is further simplified. So here, you just have a player A allocates $10 between A and B has nothing to do and nothing to say. So these rules out the possibility that A gives money to B because the fear of being rejected. And here, standard game theory, homo economics, A should give 0 to B. But again, we see that this is not what happens in real life. On average, A will give 20% to B. Okay. And what we do in this experiment is like, we do the Andreoni-Miller version, which means that the money transferred from A to B will be multiplied by a factor either larger than 1 or smaller than 1. So this paper is based on, so this design is based on the Andreoni-Miller 2002 econometrica paper. I think it's called giving according to GARP, giving according to generalized axiom of review preference. So it's a very fundamental paper, as you can tell from the title. Okay, so basically, we follow their design closely. A may have different endowment, and A can keep some money and send some money to B. In some cases, it's multiplied by 2 or 3, namely, when A is sending to B, B will receive more than the sending amount. And in some cases, it's going to be multiplied by a half or a third. In this case, giving is inefficient. Namely, you send money to B, but actually B will receive only a portion of your giving. Okay. All right, and then we have the jealousy game. Jealousy game is a very nice game. It's firstly, I think, based on, they're proposed by Chinese and Gross-Kopov. Okay, and in this case, player A is endowed with $10, and after how much he wants to give to player B, and no matter how much A give to B, A will receive 0. So in this case, a rational homo economics model will be silent about what A should do, because A should be indifferent whatever he does. Because whatever he does, he gets 0. So A should be indifferent with any amount. And in this case, a benevolent A, a warm-hearted A, should just give $10 to B, because giving is costless for him. On the other hand, a jealous A will give 0 to B, because in some cases, A will also think, okay, I have $10 to give you, but I have nothing to give myself. Why do I give you? So just like the jealousy story. Okay, so in this experiment, we're just also going to follow their design. Okay, how much of $120 to give to B? Usually people will give some amount to B, but usually that's less than a half. That's less than a half. Okay, all right, and finally, we have some background demographic information collection in part 3 in the questionnaire, which is relatively less important. Okay, so for the moment, any questions about our experimental design? So before I move to the results, everything so far, everything okay? All right. Okay. So now then I'm going to move to the experimental result. Okay, so this is our main result picture. Okay, so this is the most important result we have. Okay, so here are on the vertical axis, we have the fraction of money A gives to B in the Andreoni-Miller Dictator Game. And on the horizontal axis, we have what we call the price of giving. That's 1 over R. So if the price of giving is high, but if the price of giving is high, it means giving is inefficient because price of giving is high. If price of giving is low, it means that giving is efficient. Namely, you give less and the other receive more. And we see a clear, so I mean, especially I think psychologists are going to like our result because we have crossing here. We have crossing here. I mean, economists are not so sensitive about this, but I don't know why, but psychologists really love crossing. They love crossing in the picture. We have crossing here. Okay. The red circle, red dot, is the treatment group, and the dashed line, green dot, is the control group. Okay. And we see that in general, the green dot dashed line is pretty flat. It's insensitive to the price of giving in the control group. But in the treatment group, the line is quite steep and we see a downward sloping. And I mean, if we show this to Andreoni and Miller, probably Andreoni and Miller will say that, okay, so this is GARP, right? This is GARP, giving according to the price, giving according to the price. Okay, so the giving according to GARP result is stronger in our treatment group in the sense that when giving is efficient, when the price of giving is low, when giving is efficient, you give a little and the other receive a lot, you see a lot of giving in the treatment group. On the other hand, if you see giving is inefficient, actually in the treatment group, people give less. They don't want to waste their money. Okay. All right, and in terms of when the price of giving is 1, actually we see a little bit declining. So actually when the price of giving is 1, we also see declining giving. But this is not significant. This is not really significant. I think in the two ends, they are significant, but in the middle, it's not significant. This is our main result. Priming people with mortality salience make them giving in a more efficient way and thinking more like a social partner. Okay. And this.
Can I ask one question regarding this picture?
Yeah, sure.
It seems to be the slope of this treatment group. The slope of this line tend to be very steep between 1 over 2 and 2.
Yes.
And above that seems to be pretty flat.
You can also say that. Yeah. I mean, I'm not arguing that it's a perfect line. You can also say it's nonlinear. Yeah.
Yeah. Why is so the middle part, the treatment group is so sensitive to the price of giving, but beyond that?
That's a very good question, and my honest answer is I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's definitely a good question, but yeah, I don't think so far we have a theory for that. So we'll first just document this effect. I'm not very sure. So if I'm not very sure, I have to be honest. I don't know. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
And then we try to also categorize our subjects according to the way proposed by Anurani and Miller. So we can say that if somebody's utility function only depends on the amount of money he receives himself, we will say this is a self-interest oriented person. And if somebody's utility function seems to be the joint payoff by the two guys, we say that this is more efficiency-oriented person. Or if somebody seems to have a minimum of the two, I think this is Leontief utility, Leontief function. Then we say it's equality oriented, namely you care about the guy who's getting smaller share of the pie in the economy. And also we try to find a kind of a more, I don't know, a different version of the name for it. Or more beautiful name, we hope. Okay. So we adopt the terminology of a Hobbesian, named after, I think, Sir or not Sir, Thomas Hobbes. So the writer of Leviathan, 利维坦的作者霍布斯，就是那个豺狼人的那个感觉。So this is self-interested guy. So everybody maximize his or her profit, even though that makes him or her at war with others. So this is Hobbesian guy, type H. You may also have Cosin guy. Cosin guy is the one who is efficiency-oriented, quite economic way of thinking, named after Nobel Prize winner Ronald Coase. So this is proposed by Professor Zhou Suhong to us. To be honest, my personal favorite will be Bentham type, the 福利经济学边沁. But okay, Cosin is also good. And finally, the equality orientation, we call them Rawlsian guys. John Rawls, 约翰罗尔斯, the author of Justice, 正义论, 哈佛大学法学院的教授. Okay. So type C, type H, and type R. H for selfish, C for efficiency, and R for equality. And we really solve for the optimal giving. So of course, Hobbesian should keep all money to himself. And the Cosin should give all the money to the others if it is sufficient, and should give zero if it's not efficient. And for Rawlsian, there is a proportion solution. I'll skip the math to solve it. So you see that I do have math, but skip the details. Okay. And we categorize the subject according to the minimum distance between his behavior and the theoretical prediction by the three models, three types. And here is the second most important picture of my presentation, the second most important result of the paper. We do see that priming people with mortality salience does not significantly change the share of Hobbesian guys. Hobbesian guys seems to be still Hobbesian guys, but it seems to change Rawlsian guys to Cosin guys, change the Harvard guys to Chicago guys. Okay. You make the equality guys more likely to turn to efficiency guys. It's not making people generous or not generous, kind or not kind. They just make them, I would say, wiser. Make them wiser. Make them more like good economists. Okay. And okay, so here's the model we set up to explain our results.
Sorry, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Yeah, can you go back? Can you go back? Yeah, I'm Sango from Luohan Academy. So, yeah. Do you also have information about whether, for example, the Hobbesian, the distribution has not changed that much, but do you know whether where they jumped around? For example, the Cosin, the distribution of the Cosin changed a lot, and whether they changed to Rawlsian or Hobbesian, something like that.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think I don't have the details for the moment. I need to rely on my co-author to collect the information. Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. I do believe that it's not a one-shot, very simple story. It's not necessarily just a Rawlsian move to Cosin. I agree, must be Hobbesian move to Rawlsian and Cosin, or even Cosin and Rawlsian move to Hobbesian. I'm telling an overly simplified story here. Yeah,
I think the dynamics will be super interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think Dr. Cho also, I think I saw your name somewhere. I think maybe I saw your papers. Okay, great to see you here. Okay. All right. Yeah, so then here's the model. We consider the utility function of, it's a kind of hybrid model. We just put together all kinds of prosocial preference models in one model. Okay, we have a model, let's say, so this is for game one. So for the Dictator game. Suppose one's utility depends on the altruism utility, like, so Y is the amount of money A give to B. So if you give money to others, you are happy. So what is increasing in Y? So this is the altruism part. Okay. You may have the inequality aversion part. So people are familiar with, for behavioral economists, you will see this is basically bottom-out confused preference. This is basically just bottom-out confused preference. Your utility is decreasing function of the squared distance between your payoff and the other's payoff. And the third part is a very simple self-interest utility. You are happier if you get more money. Okay, but here, one twist we have on this model is like the following. I know maybe not all of you will agree, but this is what we do, and at least this is currently the only way we can explain our result. Okay, as you can see, here we have a parameter beta, which is the discount factor, the time preference factor. The time preference factor is only multiplied on self-interest, but not on altruism part. And the reason we argue is the following. Because you give the money, you are A, you give the money to B today. You give to B and that's all. So there's no time discounting. But only for you, if the money you keep for yourself, you get the money today. You don't necessarily spend the money today. You probably spend it tomorrow. So the money you keep for yourself is going to be discounted because you spend it later. But the money you give to the other person, you don't care whether he or she spend it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, because you give him today already. That's already all. So to some extent, here we are making a strong assumption of warm glow type of altruism instead of utility. Namely, you do good things on other people. You only care about what you do. You don't care about the impact on the other. Okay, I'm trying to argue something like this. So let me try to also explain the intuition using other examples. So for example, if you donate $100 to a charity, right? And suppose the charity takes 10% of the overhead or admin cost, which means 100 money you give is only going to translate to 90 received by the children. According to warm glow model, your utility is 100. And according to utility into utility model, your utility is 90. So that's the difference. In warm glow, you only care about how much you give. You don't care about how much the other receives. In utility and utility, you only care how much the other receives. You don't care about how much you give. Similarly, suppose there's a matching in donation. Also, you give $1, warm glow tells you your utility increased by $1. But utility and utility will take into account of the matching by the charity and so on. So that's partly, and based on this result, the nice thing is that if we do have this setup or assumption in our model, we will have this result that the optimal giving by A will be a decreasing function of discount factor and will be an increasing function of the discount rate. So this goes back to Dr. Ma's comment about how time preference change giving. So if you do the argument based on infinite horizon bargaining game, the prediction should be that when people are more patient, they will behave as if they are more altruistic. But if you believe that people have warm glow utility and you multiply the self-interest consumption, but not the giving by the time discount factor, the prediction is the opposite. We will predict that when you are more patient, you are going to behave as if you are more selfish instead of more altruistic. And somehow, this is the way we can match our result. This is the way we can match our result. Namely, the giving is a decreasing function of the discount factor, not an increasing function. So this is so far the only way we can explain the result. Okay. And also at the same time, we argue that the very nice thing about our model is if we use the same model, we have another, so this is jealousy game will be our placeable test. 安慰剂检验. Why? Because in jealousy game, you don't, as a player A, you receive 0. So you don't have the self-interest part. So you don't have the beta in the model. And therefore, in jealousy game, our theory will predict your giving doesn't depend on discount factor beta. And we also nicely find it that in the placeable test, the coefficient for discounting is not significant when we predict it's not going to be significant. So I think by doing this way, the main test and the placeable test, we seem to find out that there's a way to link time preference and prosocial behavior because people discount self-future consumption, but when they have warm glow utility of giving, they don't discount giving to others. Okay. And this is, as I said before, I'm going to be brief about this. Some people are worried that our result is driven by, if you tell people your life is limited, they're going to feel sad or afraid. So mood may be also a mediating factor, but we find that no, mood doesn't change after our priming, so it's not going to be mechanism or explanation of our finding. And also validity check. So some people may argue, if you prime them, is that really going to influence their attitude towards death? We ask them a few questions like, how much are you going to agree with, let's say, I think my life is limited, I think time is slipping away. And we do see a mildly significant difference. Like we do see significant difference between treatment group and control group at 10%. So our manipulation is valid. And that's so far about the result. And in the end, we also have some discussion for our findings. So first of all, in the literature on the relationship between religion and donation, or religion and economics, there are contradicting findings about whether religion make people donate more or donate less, or more generous or less generous. Our results seem to provide a channel. Remember, we have this nice picture here. So mortality salience may make people give more when it's more efficient, may make people give less when it's less efficient. And when the ratio is 1, the result is insignificant. So therefore, our model and our result do show that, yeah, the effect of religion, suppose that influence people's mortality salience, awareness, and so on and so forth, that can work both ways. So we can reconcile the contradicting findings of the two literature. And also at the same time, there is something interesting. I mean, when we wrote this paper, we still see a lot of anti-corruption news. And we also see, I think some Chinese government, they send the officials to visit funeral homes or hospitals. And they think that it could be an effective way of helping them to realize life is limited. Do something good, be larger than yourself, be larger than life. Don't do stupid things. Okay.
I mean, is this the incentive for sending them to those places?
That's our speculation. That's our speculation. We never ask them, so we just speculate. Okay. So basically, so then that's just let's summarize. Okay. So we did a study on, in general, the relationship between mortality salience, time preference, and prosocial behavior. We find significant result, and we seem to find a linkage between all the three of them. It seems there can be a channel, mortality salience influence giving via changing people's time preference. Okay, and yeah, so I think actually our finding can be potentially a way to tell people like why death education, 死亡教育, why death education can be meaningful for the society. So there are many kind of artistic way people say that education is very good. Why that good? I think we provide some scientific basis for why that education can be useful. Okay, I'll stop here to receive any questions related to this paper.
Yeah, thanks, Professor Bao. Maybe let me start with some questions. I think your finding is kind of interesting. So using an experiment in the laboratory, but I think the difficulty to use it in the reality is that in the laboratory you always have a counterparty.
Yeah.
Right, but in the reality, a lot of prosocial behavior you don't have a clear counterparty. I mean, it's like society as a whole, it's like a counterparty. But when you do not know whether this kind of prosocial behavior gonna have a direct impact on someone's the living standard, etc., welfare, how does that change this result?
That's a very good one. I think, there is actually, there is a large literature about giving in the society. And to my knowledge, indeed, there can be one-on-one matching or one-on-one giving, and can be also one-on-many giving. So in general, when the interaction is less personal and less involved with the personal identity and more stranger design and more one-to-many design, the incentive to giving, will be less. So basically, the giving incentive will be the strongest if that's a one-on-one matching of two persons, and especially when you know the identity of others and the others know the identity of you. So when the group size become bigger, in general, the giving and the cooperation can be smaller.
Yeah, then it's really like the repeated game thing.
Something like that. Yeah, and also there can be also something like indirect reciprocity. So just like in Chinese we say, "爱无及无." Yeah, I noticed actually, I noticed my friend Professor Liang Pinghan is here. Professor Liang Pinghan has very nice papers about 爱无及无, indirect reciprocity. When people have friends, the altruism can pass through to the whole society, as long as the society size is finite.
Okay.
Yeah, I can receive questions here, and also there is also some kind of just some quick view. I know the meeting room is booked for 1.5 hours, so if we finish the question earlier, if you're really interested, I also have some Easter eggs. But just depends on how many questions we have.
Yeah, I also have one more question. So maybe, First of all, it was like a very interesting paper, and just one. I think I missed in the middle of the presentation. So you said that if people have more the mortality salience, they're gonna care more about the social efficiency, right?
Yes.
And did you mention some kind of the mechanism why it happens? Because I think it's very striking. Yes. So does your experiment say anything about why it happens? Yeah, maybe I missed in your.
You are very right. This is a very good question. I would say that so far what we did in this paper is really more like we document this seems to be a strong effect. But in terms of why it happens, I can only say we have speculations. I can also borrow something from power management theory from psychology. But if you ask, and I can also show you this is related to time preference. But if you ask me whether I have a 100% accurate, rigorous model for it, I don't. I have to be honest. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but can you explain to us that's some of your speculation? Maybe I just would love to.
So if I can borrow something from psychology, the time management theory really says that when people think that they are going to live for a finite time, they will pursue some infinite meaning from finite life. That's the first possibility. And second thing is that they will want to build a stronger tie with a society, with a country, with a culture, which seem to last longer than the normal people life expectancy. So in this sense, I think there is some hint or suggestion from psychology pointing to when people have mortality salience, they will think that I'm going to live for finite time, but if I maximize social welfare, the society is going to live for long. Something similar to 钢铁是, sorry, I'm saying Chinese, and it's definitely unfamiliar to you, but something similar to like, okay, I live short, society live long, so I do good for society and society will.
Okay, interesting, yeah. I have another question. So I'm ignorant about this experimental literature and also experimental settings. Maybe my question is a little bit stupid, but so I wonder how much you can. What is the external validity of this result to other culture? I think culture, or maybe this is previously this Hunting mentioned about the risk attitude. Maybe risk attitude will also affect how people, that the mechanism of how this mortality, the salience will affect their prosocial behavior. Maybe that risk, the degree of the risk, different risk degree of the risk, the averseness will affect that mechanism. If that is the case, maybe in culture with a different risk averse than from China, we'll have different results. Is it that the right speculation, or you already control that in your some kind of the experiment?
Okay. Yeah, it's great that you mentioned the question about time preference or preference, the question about risk preference again. Somehow now I have a little bit better idea on that. Okay, so I think one thing is that it would be nice if we have a risk attitude measurement in our experiment. But on the other hand, if you really think about it, risk doesn't seem to play a significant role in our experiment. Because it's a dictator game. Whatever you do on your opponent, you have no risk. If you think about it, either in jealousy game or in dictator game, whatever you do on the others, you are dictator. So you don't have any risk. So that is why, on the one hand, it will be nice if we control for it. But on the other hand, I think that's exactly the reason why when we start running the experiment, risk preference didn't came to our mind. So that's
I mean the risk of fear being rejected, is that the risk?
Because we don't have rejection.
Oh, okay.
We don't have rejection in our experiment.
Yeah, but
in Ultimatum Game it will. In Trust Game it will. But in Dictator Game and Jealousy Game it will not. Yeah. So that is why. Sorry, I think I missed the first part of your question. But what is the first part of your question? I think before the risk part, also like a culture. Sorry, culture.
Oh no. So when I talk about the risk averseness is like one example of the culture. Yeah. So.
Oh, I see. Okay. So then it's okay. Then it's okay. Yeah. Yeah. And also in terms of external validity, yeah, I think we also mentioned that. So our sample is still student sample. Will be nice if we can have the resource to do more, but as behavior experimental economists, always limited by our resources.
Yeah. But I think still the results are super striking.
Yeah. It's surprising to us too, so that's why we took a long time to build the model. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so in case there, yes, sure, Meta James, yeah, please. If you have question, you can unmute yourself or type. Hi.
Okay, thank you very much. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to share my thoughts about your research.
Great.
So actually, I think you are doing kind of, it's like a game theory, right?
Yes, a little, yeah.
Okay, so I think it's very important that we need to determine the target for the game theory. So I feel a little bit just like, very complicated. So actually, as regarding to what doing the research. Actually, I think, you know, if we just like jump out of the research you are doing, actually, because I'm also a Chinese, so actually there are very famous Chinese old sayings like this: 人之将老，其言也善；人之将老，其言也爱。Yeah, right. So actually, I think if we are just like assuming that the human being is a very rational creature, so actually they are doing kind of game theory, right? So whether it is very close to the death, or whether it is because of they are just like want to change in the behavior, that depends on they are doing kind of game theory, right? It is maybe because of they are thinking they are approaching to the death. So they just want to improve the efficiency. Like for kinds of people, they still want to just like make a lot of money. But for some people, they just want to, because of the time is very limited. So they are just based on this kind of assumption. They just like adjust their game theory to want to get the maximum of the benefits actually they want. So I think maybe we can just like do the research, you know, based on this kind of logic. It is maybe lost because of the people, you know, feel that they are very close to the death. They just want to change. Maybe because they just want to maximize their value, or maybe to maximize their benefits as a individual to the society, to their family, or to themselves. They just want to get a maximum of the value of themselves. So that's the reason why when they are getting older, or maybe they feel that they're just like very close to the death. So this is what I'm thinking after, you know, I mean, and I really appreciate what you share to us, you know, I mean, your research. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, when people are getting older, so they try to maximize their value, and of course, value will mean different things to different people. Some people think value just means money, while the others think of value means something more spiritual or something more symbolic. Any other questions?
Yeah, maybe I can ask additional one, and Shan will can add on that. So recently at Luohan Academy, we can do a lot of things related to the carbon economics. I think the important thing for the carbon economics is this kind of externality about what you are doing on the society and the prosocial behavior. So if we think about this, the carbon economy as an example of prosocial behavior we want to promote, how does your research help us in understanding this
okay.
This
so here I think okay, I hope I can answer the question in this way.
Yeah.
For the moment, I didn't see a direct link between this current study with carbon emission, but I do know, and I do want to make a recommendation to you. So I think the carbon emission problem is a problem related to sustainability. And also, especially, it's about intergenerational sustainability, namely intergenerational equality and intergenerational sustainability. Let's say, especially us as a current generation, how much we care about future generation and how much we care about the long-run development of the human society. From this part, to my knowledge, the group of researchers headed by Professor Saiju, I think from Osaka University, Japan, they are doing a lot of things on prosocial preference, intergenerational preference, or altruism across generation, and the overall topic of environmental protection and carbon emission and so on and so forth. I know this because I also happen to be part of the international team for that collaboration. So far, it seems that we're not moving super fast with this project. But yeah, I mean, we can surely keep contact on this. If you want to know anything, I can send you something. And if we if we find nice results, I can also share with you.
Yeah, and also I think you for this carbon emission thing, you cannot. I think the priming may work, but you have to prime people in a different way, maybe.
Yes. So and also here, I think we can use a little bit different terminology. So if we do that in the lab, it's called priming.
Yeah.
But if you do that in the field, I think some of the priming we can also rename it as a nudge. So I mean, so when we talk about nudge can be many things. I mean, nudge is a general term assembled by Professor Richard Thaler and Swanstein and those guys. And I think in real life, many of the nudge, they are actually just priming. They're just priming. So they make you think of something and they don't force you to do something. But when you think about something, you're going to change your behavior. I think that's something like, just also like, I think in China, people are also going to do it, right? Just like smart meters for electricity, or like, how do you compare your electricity consumption with your neighbors and so on and so forth. I think those are also like a little bit like nudge, and also like we call information nudge. And some of the ways they are just priming, I would say.
Okay. Any more questions?
Okay. So in case no questions, maybe I can quickly finish. 10 minutes. I can quickly jump through some other projects I do recently, which I find maybe a little bit interesting. First study is, so first of all is that for people who are interested in behavioral game theory, actually there's something like an interesting TV program called, I don't know the English, but Chinese is like 学生21天. And actually that's supervised, that's coached by a very good behavioral game theorist, Professor Zhang Boyu, also one of my friends, and also supervised by Professor Ni Huihua, I think. And my recent 2 other experiments I did on behavioral game theory. So first of all, called divisibility of money and giving. Just something like in Chinese, we can quickly say, 你有没有零钱跟你捐钱给别人或者给钱给别人的关系。Just like this story, I can tell it in 2 minutes. Okay, when you pass a street musician, right? And suppose that you suddenly realize, oh, this street musician is not okay, so first, think about the first case. You pass a street musician, he was playing well, you want to give him $2, but you only have a $5 bill in your pocket. How much are you going to give to him? 0 or 5? So you want to give the guy 2, but you only get a $5 bill. Only get a $5 bill in your pocket. Are you going to give this guy 0 or 5? Okay, I think for the audience, if you like, you can also share your views. Are you going to give 0 or 5 for this musician? Suppose he plays very well, 0 or 5. You want to give 2, but you don't get 2. 5.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'm gonna give 0. Yeah.
0. Okay. Or supposedly, let's say, you realize that this is not a real street musician. This is Wang Lihong in disguise. Okay, so Wang Lihong disguised himself as a street musician. You want to give him, let's say, a 3.5. You want to give him 3.5. And you also have a $5 bill. Are you going to give 0 or 5? How about you're willing to give it 3.5, but you only have $5? Are you going to give 0 or 5? Okay, so this is just a small question we may meet here and there. When we do donation in real life, we want to chip in to others' farewell party or all kinds of parties. Sometimes we don't have the change. In such a case, do people round up or round down, or they just do 45 standard rounding? And our answer is that it appears that, well, actually these points are very small, but if I jump to the conclusion, it seems that people tend to round up more often for smaller amount, a small willingness to give, and they tend to round down when their willingness to give of giving is high. So let's say you have $10, but it's $10 only with 2 $5 bill. If your willingness to give falls between 2.5 and 5, or sometimes even 0 and 2.5, you're more likely to round up. But if your willingness to give falls in, let's say, between 7.5 and 10, even though standard rounding will tell that you want to round up to 10, you are still going to round. You are still very likely to give 5 or 0. People tend to avoid extreme amounts. Okay, first thing, finish. Second one is the one I recently did with my friend, Professor Liang Bin from Inner Mongolia University. So this is actually, I think, an interesting question nowadays faced by many countries like US or China or many other countries. Many countries in the world are kind of a multi-ethnicality countries, 多民族国家. And in such a case, does ethnic diversity promote cooperation or reduce cooperation? So before us, in the political science literature, usually many people will say that ethnic diversity, as proposed by Alicina, will only lead to lower public good provisions. Okay, traditionally from political science or political economy. And we did a study. So in China, so first of all, there is a very interesting science paper by Telham et al. Showing that Southern Chinese people and Northern Chinese people seem to be different in the sense that Southern Chinese people seem to be a little bit more collectivism, more 集体主义, 更多集体主义, and they tend to be more cooperative in public good provision than Northern people. And Telham argued that it seems is because growing rice need more cooperation. That makes Southern people more collectivism compared to Northern Chinese people. And we did a study on a different culture difference, coming back to Dr. Chou's question about culture. Okay, in China, there's another kind of difference between farmer culture and the nomad culture. So you have the Han Chinese farmer culture and Northern ethnicities nomad culture. So very famously, I think in Jin Yong fictions, you have 射雕英雄传, right? You have Guo Jing and Tuo Lei. You have the Guo Jing, the big kung fu guy, and the Mongolian prince. So in Mongolian culture, there's a strong culture of anda, or like brotherhoods, something like step brotherhood or something like that. So you have brotherhood with a guy, with a good friend, and you sign up a contract of having cooperation, and you punish betrayers. And here is what we do. So basically, we want to see, so first of all, is there a difference between the level of cooperation between Han Chinese people and Mongolian Chinese people due to nomad and farmer culture difference? And a quick answer to that is no, not at all. Their contribution to public good is almost exactly the same if they are in a pure Han or pure Mongolian group. Okay, if we add ethnical diversity, if we make a group, half of them are Han Chinese, half of them are Mongolian Chinese, we do see a little bit lower contribution, but the difference is not so significant. So basically, we do see the Alicina result, but the Alicina result is not so strong in our study. But more importantly, it seems that the more salient difference between Han and Mongolian lies in the punishment. We do see that when people find other people are not cooperative enough, Mongolian people are very eager to punish others, while Han Chinese are less eager to punish others. And if you put Mongolian people and Han Chinese people into the same group, the punish level can also be lowered, at least compared to the Mongolian group. And this actually helps to increase the public good provision. Low public good provision in the pure Mongolian group. Because in the pure Mongolian group,
Sorry, what is on the x-axis and the y-axis?
Oh, it's the giving. So basically, this is like you have $10 in total. How many dollars you put into the public good game, the public good?
Okay.
Yeah, just like how much of your money are you willing to contribute to the public account? Especially if you watch the 决胜21天, it's like how much money you want to invest in the, let's say, if you are a farmer, building the public irrigation system.
Okay, then the horizontal axis is the number of period you
period over time. So it's normal that in public good game, the cooperation or public good provision is going to decline over time.
Okay.
It's very hard to sustain. It's very hard to sustain cooperation.
Oh, yeah, but if in the repeated games setting, the longer horizon should make you kind of more cooperative.
No. So yes and no. Yes, in the sense that other things equal, the longer the horizon, the better the cooperation. But no, in the sense that it's like if given the game horizon, in earlier period, you are more likely to be cooperative because the number of remaining periods is larger. But you're going to, for sure, many people are going to betray in the last period. But therefore, it's a backward induction.
Okay.
It's actually a backward induction. Backward induction will lead it to the fact that in a finite horizon game, cooperation will decrease over time. That's a very good question. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so in general, so that's our findings. So we study how ethnic diversity influence cooperation. So first of all, we don't see any difference between Han Chinese and Goying Chinese people. Secondly, we actually see that when you have a very strong culture for this kind of a punishment that may lead to conflict, actually ethnic diversity may help to reduce social dilemma. So that's our argument. But with that said, I think I just almost used up the time. So I'll stop here. In case there are other questions, I can take one. Otherwise, yeah, thank you very much and happy holidays.
For the previous project, I think it's interesting, but maybe the digitization can change this a lot, because now in China, even those bagglers, they use QR code to ask for money, right? So there's no
that's a very good question.
Like you need to have a long number.
Sure, that changed things a lot. And also, I think, again, my friend Liang Pinghan has a very interesting study showing that when everything is digital payment, that really reduce a lot of property crimes. So if payment is digital, it's very hard for the burglars to steal. So that does really lower the crime.
Yeah, or it's interesting to think to compare with receive money with QR code or just with the box, which one maybe get higher?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a very good question. That's a very good research question.
That's interesting.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Maybe I can take one more, if any. Okay, so if there's no more, I think that's all for myself. Maybe, Xijie has something to say to conclude.
Yeah. So thanks, Professor Bao. I think you add a lot of diversity to the Luohan webinar series. Also, not only your experimental evidence, but also you gave us a lot of background of Chinese culture and also different characters. We are very fond of it. So I think we will conclude here. Actually, this webinar is gonna be our last webinar this year. So I wish everyone a happy new year, and we hope to see you soon in our future Luohan events. Okay, bye-bye. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.